And welcome to episode 6 of the Coach Ray Speaks podcast. I'm Coach Ray, and boy, have we got a show for you today. I've been very excited that this gentleman has agreed to come on the show, and you'll hear him momentarily. But as you know, this is the business podcast, and we're actually visiting Hollywood today, believe it or not. Although I'm not there physically, we've got Hollywood on the line. And to me, honestly, in talking to this gentleman, it's Hollywood royalty to me, because he's going to give the ins and outs of what you should do, perhaps what you shouldn't do. He's going to drop some names. He's going to tell some stories. You know, some people may be a little upset about what he says, but you know something, this is America, and you know the sanctions can't get to us here. So we're going to have a good time for the next hour. But business owners and Hollywood promoters are honestly one and the same. The job of both is to get the best candidate for the role and to know the job description down to the last detail. Promoters are the ultimate marketing directors, with their best assets being their network and target audience market. They help to facilitate decision-making decisions. They know the needs and wants of producers and directors and help them to decide on whom to select for a role. They also answer questions and concerns needing to be overcome so the client is viewed in the best possible light. Now, the gentleman with us today has been in the business for more than 30 years. He began as a producer. He was a child actor. He's been in both movies and commercials. He left the business for a period of time, but now helps to guide others to success and possibly fame. Steve Joyner can tell stories that range from on-set of the Christopher Reeve Superman movie to backstages of the WWE, and we are honored and to welcome Mr. Joyner here to the Coach Ray Speaks podcast. Mr. Joyner.
Hey, good morning, Ray. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Or I should say good afternoon where you're at, I believe.
What morning, good afternoon, good evening. There you go.
Well, good evening whenever anybody hears this. So, no, I'm doing well.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good, Steve. I'm good. When you agreed to do this, you told me you were a little bit nervous because you're so used to putting people in front of the camera. You're so used to putting people on podcasts, and you're not used to doing it, although this is where you started. So can you tell me a little about you and your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I first, when I was a kid, when I was very, very little, I was like 5 years old, my mom would tell me stories about the school that she went to in Arcadia, California, and it was called Anokia. And she went to school with like Cecil B. DeMille's granddaughter and Leo DeRocher's daughter and Ernie Kovac's daughter. And, you know, it was a school. So as a young kid, I was very weird as far as I would watch movies that predated me by a good 50 years. I also, you know, the joke of me was he was born about 50 years too late, because I'd also listened to people like Sam Cooke and, you know, Otis Redding.
Yeah, we have kindred spirits in that, because I listened to that too growing up.
Oh man, but you know, we're around the same age, so it's a little bit odd, I guess, for some people. I don't know. So when I was 5, they were shooting a commercial for RC Cola. Well, I don't even know if it's around anymore, but it was this. It was at the beach, and they needed kids with certain height, hair color, background, and I was, you know, a stupid little extra in that thing. And then I started doing a lot of extra work, and the question that I guess asked every now and then is, how do you know half the people you know? And I don't know how to answer it, to be honest with you. The world was a lot smaller back when you and I were younger, and you just met people here and there. Mm-hmm. So I said I did a couple commercials, a couple things here and there, and you would meet people, and that's really the only answer I could give. And then there's some people that I wanted to meet in this world, and thank God, Mark Zuckerberg and social media actually happened.
All right, but you know, Steve, we got to be honest. Now, people take a look at you, take a look at your picture. You look like a Hollywood actor anyway, man. You have the look.
I'm not. Well, I'm flattered, but no, I'm not. It wasn't the main thing I wanted to do. And plus, when you're a child, especially, I have friends that did amazing things when they were kids, but they also gave up a lot of their childhood. And I was kind of well aware of that. And really, I had an epiphany when I was about, I just turned 9. I was 9 years old. I was on an episode of The A-Team, and I remember there was a kid. There's like a bunch of us kids. It was the typical, bad guys are going to come destroy youth center that B.A. Baracus, Mr. T ran, and my line was like, are they going to shut us down? Just simple stuff like that. And these things usually were shot in the course of like 4 or 5 days at max. And there was a guy I was talking to, and he looked my age. He looked like, but he was like 16 years old, and he was the most miserable person I had met at that time. And what I learned is when you take on that type of life, you give up things too. And I just didn't want to do it. I wanted to live a normal childhood.
So is that why you never pursued acting full time?
Yeah, that and my parents, they had their issues going on. It just didn't happen, and I don't regret it at all. It's cool to have been there and done it for a minute and then remember it, And there's some people that there's one guy that lived on my block, and he went all the way, but yet he missed out on high school. It was funny. His high school prom was actually on a sitcom that he did. That was the closest thing he had to going to a prom.
Wow.
So you give up things, but it's just like anything else in life. If you start a new job in a new city, you have to give up friends in the current city. It's changes, and sometimes you welcome the changes. Sometimes you just don't want them, and you're comfortable with how things are. And I was one of those kids that I knew what I wanted. I really liked theater, man. I did a lot of theater in San Diego, and
what were you in San Diego? What were you in, Steve?
I was in a play called Arsenic and Old Lace, which was actually set in Brooklyn, and it was about these 2 elderly women that would kill widowers and put them in a basement. It was a comedy, believe it or not, and I played Jonathan, one of their sons that came home, and he was with a plastic surgeon who had botched him. He got drunk, and so he looked like Boris Karloff. And the movie is absolutely hysterical, Ray. If you ever see it, ask your dad about it, because it was way back in the 40s. But it's a really funny movie, and to do it every night for a couple of weeks live, every night, it was just, except for Sundays, it's live, man. So when you're doing live, whether it be radio or anything else, if you messed up, man, that's it. So you got to hit marks and be on take. And then sometimes even the mistakes would be great.
So now, the difference that I know between you and, say, another publicist is that you've actually done the work, Steve. So you can give someone very valuable advice. So tell me some of the clients that you have. You don't have to name drop, at least not right now. And what advice you give them. Do you have anyone that's on stage right now? Do you have anyone that's in the movies? I know you have people that are looking to get on podcasts right now. So, but what advice do you give them also in their acting, and what they do and what they're pursuing?
Well, okay, how it usually goes is like this. I'll talk to somebody, and I'm not an agent. I'm not a manager. I always clear that up. So I will never tell an actor or actress, oh, here's where you get a headshot done, things like that. Or here's an acting tip. That's not my job. My job is promotions. And the first thing I tell them is I'll be like, well, why do you want to do this? And if they give me the answer that they want to be, a multimillionaire and marry some hot blonde and live in Malibu, I'll tell them to be a plastic surgeon. So really, it's an uncertainty. But usually if they tell me, well, I like performing, I'm doing this right now to pay the bills and take care of my family, that's cool. Then I'll work with the person. But if they're so, you can tell, like, sometimes, honestly, Ray, you know this, you could tell when somebody has got an insecurity and they need something else to fill that void. So if you're doing acting to fill a void that it's not right. It's not good. So, but if they know themselves really well and they know that they enjoy doing this and they know that there's uncertainty, because there are people I know who were on, one guy in particular, he was on a sitcom for 13 years, and he's not rich at all. He does autograph shows to make money.
How often does that happen, Steve? I mean,
it happens a lot,
because people, the dream is to take the bus, train, airplane, whatever, to get out to Hollywood and get on a set, and you're going to audition and, you think you're going to make a whole bunch of money. I mean, what is the reality to that? And how many people that have failed in opposed to succeeding?
I know a few people that failed, and it was nothing on them, to be honest with you. What it is, okay, so there's roughly about, I don't know, 13 million, I'm guessing, people in Los Angeles, like New York, huge, huge city. And you go there, and there's at least a couple million actors. Some guy told me this. This is not my own words. And he'd been around for eons. Okay, so you got about 2 million actors. Maybe, I don't know, 2,700 of them work constantly. The main objective is just to keep getting work. Now, the whole thing when they say, star or superstar or whatever, when you and I were kids, man, there were superstars. There were people like Paul Newman, and there were, you don't see them that much anymore. And I knew a couple people that did go out there, and nothing happened for them, because when you go into a room to audition and there's 200 people that look just like you or roughly like you, you have to stand out. It's like, you were involved in athletics. You were a coach. We were talking about this the other day, about how you could have been the all-star, all-state in your region and so on. But when you go to, if you get into college, great. But when you're in college, you're hoping to possibly get in the NFL. And
Right.
the sorting out process is tough.
Right.
And the people who cast projects, movies or whatever, they're looking at, can we make money off this person? That's really all it is. Because it's a huge business. And I know people that have gotten on sitcoms.
Mm-hmm.
They did a pilot, and they're like, man, the world, this is going to be great, and so on. And the pilot never gets picked up, or it airs, and no interest. I mean, that's what it's been like. There's a guy I knew, he did a pilot. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, is that common? I mean, for so many pilots to be done and just they remain on the cutting room floor?
Yeah.
You know what? With that, Steve, we're going to take our first break. I want to get back to that topic in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Mr. Steve Joyner, publicist, Hollywood publicist, on the Coach Ray Speaks podcast. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Coach Ray Baxter, and I want to talk to you for a moment about your business. That's right, your business. Have you laid a foundation of reliability and trust within your team? How do you deal with difficult customers? Now that you have completed the sale, what's your retention strategy? Ladies and gentlemen, not only am I a business strategist, but a subject matter expert on leadership and how leadership can enhance your bottom line. I speak throughout the country and all over the world, and I have 5 signature programs through which you can teach your staff to ask insightful questions to derive pain points, to discover whether your leaders are focus-driven or chaos creators, to not just survive the day, but to reduce service recovery, and finally, to learn not to apologize to a customer, but to collaborate and give more than what's expected. At RBJ Global Solutions, our goal is to provide an energetic, strategic, and profitable approach to organizational front lines. Contact me. I'd love to speak with you about talking to your group. That's Coach Ray, that's COACHRAY, at CoachRaySpeaks.com.
And we're back on the Coach Ray Speaks podcast, episode 6, talking with Hollywood producer, actor, radio personality, and publicist Steve Joyner. And before we took a break, Steve, we were talking about Hollywood pilots and how many people actually perform pilots and they never get picked up.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. I have a dear friend of mine named Sandy Helberg, and Sandy's been in a bunch of Mel Brooks films, and he a lot of stuff, and his son Simon is on The Big Bang Theory. And this is a funny little story about kind of what I just, to illustrate what I was talking about. In 1976, they were casting a show called The Love Boat, and Sandy got cast as one of the leads. and they shot the pilot, and they went out. They had the ship, the whole 9 yards. And they went to Mexico, I believe it was, and they ran it, and no interest, nothing at all. And then about a year and a half later, Aaron Spelling tried to do it again. They recasted Sandy and everybody else, and they picked it up. So that sort of stuff happens. Sandy's son goes to read for the show about a bunch of nerds, and it didn't really. It got picked up, and well, it blew up. So it's one of these weird things that happens every now and then.
Steve, what are some of the projects you've been linked to?
And when I was a child, as far as like stuff
both with your child and perhaps as an adult.
Like A-Team, Twilight Zone, the movie. I actually was in a movie with Bill Cosby and Ellie Gould, believe it or not.
Wow.
In 1981, Disney did a horrible movie called The Devil and Max Devlin. And I did you ever see it?
You know what? When you told me about that the other day, I Googled it. Yeah. That's a funny movie.
It's kind of weird. It's a very, I can't explain the synopsis. You gotta see it or read about it. It's like Disney made this. It was 1981. And I honestly can say when I met Mr. Cosby, he was a nice dude, man. He asked us about our life, what we do. I mean, that was a long time ago, but, and I was there, and I was just one of the kids, because they would say, okay, we need a little African American kid, a Hispanic kid, this, and I was just the kid, one of the kids they needed. That was it. And so that, and then I worked with a couple indie projects, the theater stuff. So not really a huge resume, but as far as working in acting.
But a whole plethora of people, that's for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they're all older than I am. A lot of and we were talking about Superman yesterday, and inadvertently I knew a lot of about 7 people that were in that film. Same thing with Jaws.
Well, before we go to the movies, and I do want to discuss that, you mentioned a story yesterday about the Superman project, and I found it very interesting. I wonder if you'd tell that story to our audience about Christopher Reeve.
I wasn't. Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't there. I mean, this was one of the actors from that film was a dear friend of mine. Still is. I haven't talked to him in a while, and his name was Jack Halloran, and he played in 1 and 2. He had a bigger role in 2, where he played one of the villains. And
he's one of the 3 Kryptonians that was trapped in the
there was
in the zone, Zod, the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, and he was a big mute one, kind of like the Enforcer, if you will, big brutish guy. Anyway, they filmed 1 and 2 simultaneously, and the reason being was, and Jeff East, a friend of mine who was the teenage Superman in the first one, he was telling me that the whole movie, how when you do an investment, you got to really make a good, this is how they made Superman. Marlon Brando. Had they not gotten Marlon Brando, Superman wouldn't have been made.
Wow.
They got Marlon Brando, and the rumor has it, and I've heard this from Jack and Jeff and a couple other folks in that film, Brando got like $8 million for 12 days of work. And
wait a minute, say that again. $8 million for 12 days of work? Wow.
That's how they sold the film. Well, it was Marlon Brando. You put him in a movie, I mean, it's impressive.
Yeah.
And that's how they got the backing. And the Salkheims and the people that produced that movie, they used Brando, and they got him, and they decided to film 1 and 2. When I was telling you about the edited version of 2, Brando's in part 2. In the release we saw as a kid, he wasn't. And they were filming 1 and 2, and it was like 14 months, man. It was over a year. And they were doing it over in England and New York and Canada. And my friend was talking about when Jack was talking about when they were in England, Christopher Reeve was all 26 years old when he made this movie. And up until then, he had done a lot of plays and stuff and a couple commercials, but this was his big thing, and nobody really knew him. But when you look at the original film, Brando, Glenn Ford, Jackie, all these great people were in that movie. And he just got a little full of himself, and he had a lot of yes men and people around him telling him how great he was. And my friend Jack's history, his family history. Reeves was talking about it, kind of upset him a little bit, and he confronted him, and he apologized in private. He confronted him in private, and he apologized, and that was it. And then they go out on the set, and he turned around and publicly tried to humiliate him. Where in turn, Jack almost knocked his lights out, but for the sake of filming and his face, he could have busted it in. But it's just, Christopher Reeve was not a bad person. It's just like anybody else, kind of like Mike Tyson. You get all his fame at once, and you get the world, and people know who you are, but you have a Don King or somebody in your head giving you bad advice, and then that's what happened.
The backstories are amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's the most challenging client? I'm sorry. What's the most challenge, or who's the most challenging client you may have had?
I don't want to say his name, but there was a guy, and I hope he's okay wherever he is. But he he was from Boston, and he was very he did modeling, and he had a matinee look, like he looked great. But the thing was that he had a lot of insecurities, and he was on the verge of joining the Screen Actors Guild, and he had a girlfriend that he cared about a lot, but he was very insecure, and he was very I guess needy is a good word, I don't know, but he would call me up and just rant about, I should have got this, they don't know who I am, and that sort of stuff. So whenever anybody says they don't know who I am and they start talking about themselves in the third person, then you got to really worry,
Yeah, you got to take a step back, right?
Yeah, and he was just a little bit too, like, they offered him roles and things to play minor characters, but his thing was, if I'm not the lead, or if I'm not, one of the blah blah blah, then I'm not doing it.
Wow.
And it wasn't always about money either. It's just this guy had a big ego, and finally, I told him, I said, I called him, I put him, took him to task. I said, you're being a damn jerk. There are people that would die just to play bad guy number one, or just to get in there, and you're being a narcissistic. It's just cool.
But let me ask you something. Let me ask you something though, because I know with athletes sometimes, the bigger the ego, the more they're able to do. I mean, for someone to be a lead, for someone to be do you have to have? Is that a characteristic that someone has to have, a big ego to even be in front of the camera like that?
Well, I personally don't think so. I think it's a lot of the best actors. They've, 5 great ones right now. There's a difference. They're confident in themselves, but they're not rude, and they're not mean. They're very giving. Because, if you're in a conversation, like if you and I were doing a film and a scene, we're only going to make each other look good if we try.
Right. But
if we, so a lot of the good, like, oh God, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, man, and Denzel Washington, and there's a lot of names we could drop. These are people that are very giving. They know that they need someone to feed off of. So when you watch a movie with anybody that caliber, and they're talking to a guy that you don't know who the hell they're talking to, it could be just some random, some character that's got like 2 lines. They'll really give that person. It's a give and take, and those are the best. To have an ego and to have confidence and not an overbearing ego, that's gold right there. But like I said, someone with a huge ego in the industry, it's just because they're missing something, and always it kind of self-implodes sometimes. The majority, that's what I've noticed. Like William Shatner.
Okay. All right, let's talk about him. Go ahead.
Oh, he's a very interesting personality. I've only met okay. I can understand why he is the way he is. I'm not defending and being rude to anybody, but he was on a show where he kind of politicked his way around a little bit and kind of used the fact that he was the star of the show to. If you look, you'll see a lot of his fingerprints all over the old Star Trek episodes, and apparently, rumor has it he was abusive to George Takei and Michelle Nichols. I wasn't there, I don't know, but he just that it was him. And then another rumor has it that Leonard Nimoy got more fan mail than him, and he blew a gasket one time. But
That's come
I
out in
think
the Comic-Con
mhm.
trades. I've heard that before, where Shatner has been deemed to be rude and condescending to a lot of his castmates.
Yeah, but here's the thing too. Also, in his defense, he okay after Star Trek ended, he couldn't get a job to save his life. See, people don't realize Star Trek was not a popular show with the masses originally. It had a good following, but when it went into syndication, that's when people really got into it hardcore. And during from 69 to about 76, 77, Shatner couldn't get arrested. He was doing like, theater. And there was a point where, and he got divorced and he had 3 kids to take care of. That man was living in a camper at one time. And he would actually, the lowest point of his career was he would actually dress up in the costume and do child's parties. So, but then in 1978, after Star Wars came out, Close Encounters, they realized, hey, there's a sci-fi craze going on. Paramount's all we need to jump on this, and that's where they made Star Trek the motion picture and brought him back and the other castmates. But for him, every day in his life, when he does Comic Cons, this is something I want people to remember. Some people I know that have done these iconic things. When they do Comic Cons, they will get asked the same question over and over again, or so they get a little. Maybe they're having a bad day. Who knows? But one man I know in particular was one of the screenwriters on Jaws, and when I did a couple autograph shows with him, and I asked him, I said, hey, what's it like? Because all day people were asking about Roy Scheider and Dreyfuss, and mechanical stuff, just about the film.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fans, so they're asking me fan questions. That's normal. And I said, what's it like? And Carl's like, well, imagine living next door to your best friend from high school, and every day they talk about the fire alarm he pulled in the 11th grade. It gets a little, overdone sometimes.
Understood.
But with Shatner, when he's out in public, I think people try to, let me get a selfie with you doing the Star Trek. I can see why he's a little turned off sometimes, but it's no reason to be overly mean to people.
I think as fans, we forget that these are human beings, and every day, of doing, like you mentioned, doing the same thing over and over again. Sure, you're bound to get tired of that. You're bound to have a bit of an attitude about it because you want to live other parts of your life, right? You don't want to have to deal with this on an everyday basis.
Yeah, idol worship's the worst thing. When you forget the fact that, and this goes for sports figures or anybody else, musicians, when somebody idols them so much, or they almost dehumanize them. And they almost forget, no, they're real people. They can get cancer. They can, they could lose loved ones. They're real people, just like you and I. Their name and their bank accounts may be bigger, but at the end of the day, they're just like you and I.
Wow. Well, Steve, what we're going to do is take our second break. Okay. You're listening to the Coach Ray Speaks podcast. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Coach Ray Baxter, and I want to talk to you for a moment about your business. That's right. Your business. Have you laid a foundation of reliability and trust within your team? How do you deal with difficult customers? Now that you have completed the sale, what's your retention strategy? Ladies and gentlemen, not only am I a business strategist, but a subject matter expert on leadership and how leadership can enhance your bottom line. I speak throughout the country and all over the world, and I have 5 signature programs through which you can teach your staff to ask insightful questions to derive pain points, to discover whether your leaders are focus-driven or chaos creators, to not just survive the day, but to reduce service recovery, and finally, to learn not to apologize to a customer, but to collaborate and give more than what's expected. At RBJ Global Solutions, our goal is to provide an energetic, strategic, and profitable approach to organizational front lines. Contact me I'd love to speak with you about talking to your group. That's Coach Ray, that's CoachRay at CoachRaySpeaks.com.
And we're back on the Coach Ray Speaks podcast, talking with producer, actor, radio personality, and publicist Steve Joyner. Steve, here's a question for you.
Yeah. Okay.
You work with a lot of different people, a lot of different types of people. But are there actors or actresses that you wouldn't, I'm not asking you to drop names, but are there people that you refuse to work with?
Absolutely.
Can you give me some examples?
Well, people that are you feel people out, and just like you would, you try to give people the benefit of the doubt. But when you have like an intake phone call, when I have an intake phone call with somebody, and I just get a bad something about them, yeah, I won't work with them. And it's funny because when they're sometimes they'll be very nice when you tell them sorry, I can't help you. Then they turn on you and they get all burly. So so it kind of clarifies what you're wondering, about them to begin with. But no, there's certain people, like I said, I won't work with. Like if they are looking to get into doing this for all the wrong reasons, then no, I won't work with them because it's not going to work out. And I don't discourage them from chasing their dream and all that. That's fine, but I can't help you with that. And I get approached a lot every now and then, and then also, honestly, there's people I won't work with who, because of the fact that they haven't done anything. So if I send them to a show like you or anybody else, what the heck are you going to talk about? There's nothing there. And something bad, I'll just say, there's nothing to talk about there.
Well, speaking of people and backgrounds, I'd like to talk about you for a moment. People, when they see the finished product, they don't know what went into that product. They don't know your background. They don't know your history. They don't know the things that have made you become whom you are today. And you and I have talked about it, and I know you want to get into it a little bit. Can you tell me about not the acting part of your background now, but there are other things that have gone into making who Steve Joyner is today? Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, in the short form, because I came from a broken home, parents that did not get along at all. Had have a brother that subsided to drug use. I wasn't popular by any means in school. Was bullied a lot. Just didn't have the blueprint of life laid out. Kind of had a rough go at it up until I was in my 30s, and lost a lot of people that I loved. Made some mistakes. One of them was a doozy, and I lost my freedom for about 5 months. And during that time, I lost someone I cared about a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes. And when you lose your freedom for a long period of time, it humbles you, and it also makes you realize, well, what did I do to do this? And I know I did something bad, and I physically hurt somebody bad enough to earn me a jail sentence. And it was all me. It was all me, buddy. And the thing is that I learned, you got to think sometimes. And I wasn't thinking. It didn't excuse it. I wasn't thinking. We get caught up in the heat of the moment of things, and I thought, and this is a funny thing, I thought I was doing a noble thing because I beat up a guy who said something really mean to my mom, and I lost my mind for a moment there, but it ended up costing me time, and my mom subsequently died, and I had a jail guard tell me that my mom died. I was messed up.
Yeah.
And you get out. When I got out of the jail, and I know like 5.5 months, it's called a county year out here. It's not a long period of time because some guys go away for, guys have gone away for years.
Yeah.
But it's still long enough. Let's put it this way. And so you have to decide, okay, am I going to repeat this behavior and go back? Am I going to give up on humanity in the world become a vicious bastard, or am I going to, better myself? And I choose the latter. I said, I'm going to better myself because my mom didn't raise a quitter, and I learned, man, and it was a very valuable learning experience. It was a very painful learning experience, and there were times when, after you have done something like that,
Mm-hmm.
you get out, and people don't even want to talk to you. People don't want to deal with you. I told this story about I went on a date with a woman, and she found out that I got in trouble and didn't want to see, because on paper.
How did she do that? She looked you up? She Googled you?
Oh yeah, you can Google that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it says it out there, especially if it's fresh, or and I think she, if memory serves right, she worked with the sheriff's department in some degree, or she did something, and she looked it up, and on paper it was like Gaddafi, but
Yeah.
in reality, because that's the DA's job, is to make you look bad and make you look worse than you actually are.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, I can, and I don't hate her for that, or was mad. I respect her for that. But it's also in society how we take an assumption on somebody and then automatically make a judgment on them that's ironclad instead of getting to know the person.
Right.
Because I have met people who have done, done horrible things, and they learned, and they redeemed themselves. And I don't want to get on the topic of religion or anything, but it's funny because certain religions, let's put it this way, Ray, certain religions say, their God will forgive you for any indiscretions, but they're also very judgmental as well.
Yeah.
So,
Steve, you know that I work with justice involved youth, and I teach a class.
absolutely.
So, what would you tell someone that has been in your shoes, someone that has done time, someone that has redeemed themselves? How do you come back from that? I remember you telling me you were having trouble getting a job at some point.
How do you come back?
How do you come back from that? How do you come back from seeing yourself on Google, where and unfortunately I've had several young men that had this situation. Their case is online. Everything they've done is online, and it can be looked up by anyone, not just someone that they may want to get a job from. So how do you come back from that?
I was going to say, especially if you get on the news too. I made the news.
Yeah. You made the news.
Oh yeah. Guy beats up two college. I made the news. But how do you come back from it? You know what? The best way to come back with it is to surround yourself with people who are not going to drag you down. And with me, I had to deal with probation officers and anger management classes, all the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Do it and soak it all up, man, and really, listen to people like yourself, like you, Ray, what you do with the guys back there, and listen to them, because at the end of the day, you and I'm sure a lot of your colleagues do not want to read that one guy you were just dealing with is gone away for 20 years or died. That you don't want to read that. And the main thing is put in the legwork and learn that, hey, I'm gonna deal with criticism. I'm gonna deal with people, but I'm not gonna focus on that. I'm gonna focus on the people that could show me a different way to live. And with what you do, Ray, is amazing, because we're talking about it, and it's not even humorous. It's just a reality that there are people that they can't even tie a necktie.
Right.
Things that our fathers taught us, because they got indoctrinated in the system and they became institutionalized.
Right.
So it's an unlearning process, is what I would tell the people. You have to unlearn, and you have to just really, forgive yourself. Just forgive yourself.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, forgive yourself and realize, look, I made a mistake, but I'm not a mistake. I made one. I'm not a mistake. I just made one. And now how can I change it? And then if you change it, you get your life in order. And as far as employment goes, there are places that won't hire you, but you know what? There's a lot of places that will too.
That's true.
And I think also too, I would tell this to your guys and all that, or anybody else, is that after you get your life in order, you'll see that good things come in your way. They will happen. That's no lie. They will happen. So good things will come your way. And then you also have a moral obligation to take to take what you've learned and give it to somebody else.
That is so important. I think people just don't understand the true meaning of giving back.
They don't. They don't. And the thing is I don't do a lot of these shows, and I'm honored to do this one with you, Ray. I really am, because I have a story, and I never thought it was that interesting. I met a lot of interesting people who did a lot of interesting things, but I did an interview with Anthony. Sorry, I was eating something earlier. You tried that new Carlton's beef jerky, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We were going to
Yeah,
talk
good
about
stuff.
that, but I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, our friend Howard Anderson back in New Hampshire, he has a company called Carlton's Grand Jerky, and I was never really a beef jerky fan. This is good stuff. So sorry, I was eating some of that.
That's okay. We
Um,
we had in episode 4 we had Howard on, and that
oh, you
episode
did?
actually will be released next week. But
Yeah,
we
he
had
was a
Howard
good guy.
on. Yeah, we talked about him. We talked about the business. We talked about the sweet brine, grand beef jerky, and the business opportunities behind it. So if you want to listen to that,
Absolutely.
listen to episode 4 of the Coach Ray Speaks podcast. You'll have all the details on Howard Anderson and Carlton's beef jerky, but
Grand jerky.
grand
Yeah.
jerky. I keep saying beef jerky, but it's grand jerky. Absolutely, he'd kill me if I did that. If I said that.
No, it's got a cool packaging and all that, and he's a great guy. And
No, he is. And, the
I was
great thing about that is it's soft. Beef jerky usually
yeah.
is tough. It is tough to chew, but it's soft and it comes in a vacuum packaging. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, and if you are an older person with dentures and other things, you can actually eat it, which you don't, because I know people with dental conditions, and they can't eat gum or beef jerky or stuff like that. So it's kind of cool.
Steve,
But
let's get back to you though. Tell me how you feel social media has changed the game for you.
Oh, it's allowed me to meet people like yourself that you and I would never have met if it wasn't for social media.
That's very true.
We're on two different sides of the country and everything, but it's social media, if used correctly and right, it's an amazing thing. But if you want to be a knucklehead on it, well, it won't it won't do anything for you.
Well, we know plenty of those, unfortunately. We know plenty of those.
Well, it is what it is, just like anything else. And it's funny because when I look at people on social media, and I'm sure you do too, a lot of dramas out there and a lot of bickering and a lot of trolling goes on. And when people like troll really hardcore when they're trolling things, I'm thinking, man, this is all energy you could have put on something else, and you took the time of your day to troll somebody. Good for you, good on you. That you're a moron because you could have used that for something else. When I was in high school, I remember my teachers, a couple friends of mine, we would read about just different things, and I remember we were into George Orwell, things like that, but we were also being clowns and just doing silly stuff. And my teacher's like, you guys are really smart kids, and if you used all this energy you're doing for the stupid crap and put it on something good, man, there's no limit for you guys. And I think that applies in adulthood with social media too. But hey, they're always going to be out there, and I don't know. It is what it is.
So if someone is a burgeoning actor, actress, and they wanted to use social media to help them either learn their craft better or be recognized and noticed, what would you suggest that they do?
Oh, if they want to learn their craft, don't learn it on social media. I mean, there are acting coaches out there. There's tons of them. Find one, make sure that you can do business together, and make sure that person has a good, reputation. Because there's a lot of acting coaches in Los Angeles that they did a beer commercial in like 1983, and they haven't been hired for anything since. But all of a sudden they're Lee Strasberg. So you got to watch out for those things. Definitely watch out for the Barbizon type things where it's like, for $2,000 we'll make you a star. It doesn't happen, by the way. Watch out for those little fly-by-night scams. But look the person up and make sure you can do business with them. And also look at and if they have negative and positive, just use your, really use your gut instinct on that one. As far as an acting coach, um, there are groups for actors if they want to network with each other. Because I'm a big, fan of networking.
Hmm.
But just, you know, and if you want to promote yourself on social media, by all means do it. Um, a guy like me is hired to take you to a different level, by using podcasts and radio stuff. That's just a niche I found.
Hmm.
And it seems effective because if I put an actor on a program like yours, Ray, and no one knows who he or she is, well, then they're on their radar. But at the end of the day, it's all about, will they get noticed? Will they land something? It's just big 21st century networking.
Well, with
One of
that,
my big things.
oh, go
Oh,
ahead. I'm
okay.
sorry.
Oh, one of my big things is, I know we're wrapping up, and really, Ray, it's been a pleasure. And please say hello to your father for me.
I will.
But oh, I always tell that to you because my dad's been gone for 20 years now.
Hmm.
Actually, it's been 20 years this year. One of the main things I could tell anybody as far as acting goes is this: really, if you have a good life right now and you're happy with yourself, you've already made it in life. You've already made it. As far as acting goes, there's no guarantees, but if you really try, you know, give it the 5 year rule sometimes. See what could happen. If anything happens in 5 years, maybe it wasn't meant to be. My friend Eddie told me about that years ago. But also, be very giving too. Don't be a glory hound, hot dog and grandstanding. Give up. That's one thing that really recoils me about a lot of people is they will, like when I used to date, when I was dating, I would always, like, if a girl was just talking about herself, like, to no end, that didn't really do it for me, man. But if she says, I'd ask, well, what about your family? And she would talk about other people that meant a lot to her in her life that made her who she is. That always did it. So if you're an actor, support your other people and filmmakers or whoever you're dealing with, and really, you know, do it for the right reasons. And because movies and all that stuff, that's not going to cure what's already missing. You have to cure that if you're missing something. And
Wow, that's
and that
great.
goes, with anything.
That's
Yeah,
great advice. I just want to drop a couple of names that you've dropped already, and maybe you could add some others and just tell us like a quick 30 seconds. The A
sure.
Team.
A Team. George Papard was a jerk. Dwight Schultz and Dirk Benedict were amazing people. Mr. T was a very comedic man, and Papard was just he just loved himself too much. So.
All right, the WWE. You know a couple of people from the WWE.
Well, a couple of them actually passed away. Kurt Hennig and a couple other guys. Great men who do a very dangerous job, even though people think it's all fake and phony. Don't ever tell them that because they really put their lives out there and they have been hurt a lot and they travel 256 days a year. But very great guys. Sadly, a lot of them succumb to addiction because of all the physical damage.
The Fish movie, Jaws.
Ah, one of my favorites. Yeah. My friend Carl Gottlieb, he was a screenwriter. Another guy I know, Joe Alves, who was a production designer. He built the shark. Long story short, that was a movie that no one had any faith in, and they thought it would be the end of everybody. Spielberg was not Spielberg at that point, and it was marked with disaster through productions, everything going wrong you could think of, millions being lost, and it opens up and it became the first summer blockbuster and kind of haunted the minds of America for decades.
Star Wars, Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford was a smart guy who was at the right place at the right time out of necessity because he was a carpenter. He was not an actor.
Wow.
And he was reading lines with a lot of people that were up for that role. And it's actually his birthday today, incidentally.
Oh, wow.
And he was reading the lines, and Lucas said, "I want to use you." I mean, he was just a guy that he was a very giving guy because he was, a lot of at the rap party for American Graffiti. My friend Candy Clark was in that movie, Paul Lamont. Lucas said, "I'm doing this like space cowboy movie type thing," and he went in, and a lot of people wanted nothing to do with it. And it's funny, a lot of these big movies we grew up with were kind of like, laughed at or kind of frowned upon, the ideas. and then look what happened. But Ford said, no, I'd like to be a part of that, but if you need help building sets, and well, it went the other way for him.
Yeah,
That's
wow.
great.
Okay. And finally, two of my all-time favorites, Superman.
Superman, um, amazing talent pool of people. Um, Beautiful, real well-written movies. A time where CGI, there was no CGI, so things weren't running wild. Um, Main character had a very inflated ego due to other people. Tragic thing that happened to him. Became a humble individual later on, and a movie franchise that could have gone on to be bigger, but due to the fact of the producers firing the director halfway through the second one, it sadly the franchise died a really quick death with 3 and 4. I haven't seen the new one, so I can't speak on it.
Steve, I'm going to bring you back because there's a lot
Yeah.
of topics that we did not get to cover, but I definitely want to cover with you. I thank you so much for doing this today. We've been listening to producer, actor, publicist, and radio personality Steve Joyner. And
Thank you.
You have listened to the Coach Ray Speaks podcast, episode 6. This has been a good one. Take care, and thank you for listening.
Hey, this is Coach Ray from Coach Ray Speaks. I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. We hope to give you great content with each and every episode. If you happen to want to speak with us or have any comments about the show, please contact me at Coach Ray, COACHRAY, at CoachRaySpeaks.com. Otherwise, lift your feet up, light them if you got them. We'll be right back with great conversation.